The sound of muted whispers filled the vast hall as representatives of numerous alien species stood at a respectful distance, their eyes fixated on the center of the grand assembly chamber. There she was, Princess Celia of the Iridani Empire. Her presence commanded attention, not because of her physical stature, for she was frail and confined to a hovering mobility pod, but because of the air of pity and disdain that followed her like a shadow. Born blind and with underdeveloped limbs, Celia was considered an anomaly, a misstep in the otherwise superior genetic lineage of the Iridani. Her people, renowned for their near-perfect physiques and heightened senses, viewed her existence as a stain on their evolutionary pride. Yet, as the only surviving heir to the throne after a catastrophic attack by rival factions, Celia was the last hope for the Empire's continuation. Tradition dictated she must bond with a partner to cement alliances and ensure the survival of her bloodline. But no one wanted her. One by one, potential suitors from the galaxy's most prestigious races declined, masking their rejection behind carefully worded diplomatic excuses. The Kresh, with their warrior-like builds, muttered about the unsuitability of her condition. The Scytheri, a species of ethereal beings who prize perfection, avoided her gaze entirely. Even among her own kind, there were whispers of letting the royal line quietly fade away. And that's when humanity stepped forward, or rather, one human did. Alex Carter wasn't anyone special by galactic standards. A mid-tier diplomat from Earth, he was stationed on the Iridani homeworld as part of humanity's effort to foster interstellar relations. Humans, still relatively new to the galactic stage, were often seen as scrappy underdogs, clumsy, loud, and hopelessly sentimental. Yet, despite these perceptions, Alex had earned a reputation for his empathy and unconventional approach to diplomacy. When the call for potential bondmates had been broadcast across the galaxy, Alex had watched the proceedings with a mix of curiosity and unease. Like everyone else, he had noticed the palpable discomfort whenever Princess Celia was mentioned. He saw the way the dignitaries averted their eyes, the way the Iridani delegation bristled with embarrassment at her very existence. It didn't sit right with him. So when yet another suitor, a towering alien with shimmering silver skin, delivered a thinly veiled insult before excusing himself from consideration, Alex made a decision that would change his life forever. "I'll do it," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. All heads turned toward him, a sea of shocked expressions and wide, unblinking eyes. The Iridani delegation froze, their faces a mix of disbelief and offense. Even Celia, who had remained silent throughout the rejections, tilted her head slightly, as if trying to make sense of his words. "You what?" one of the Iridani officials stammered, his voice dripping with incredulity. "I volunteer to bond with Princess Celia," Alex repeated, stepping forward. His tone was steady, though he could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him. The official's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "This is not a matter to be taken lightly, human. The bond is sacred. It requires commitment, strength, and respect." Alex interrupted, his gaze sharp. "Because from where I'm standing, none of you seem to be showing her any." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, a mixture of outrage and grudging admiration. Alex didn't care. His eyes were fixed on Celia, who was now regarding him with an unreadable expression. "Princess," he said, addressing her directly, "I don't know what your people expect from this bond. I don't know if I'm what you need or want, but I do know what it feels like to be underestimated, to be dismissed before you've even had a chance to prove yourself. If you'll have me, I'd be honored to stand by your side." For a moment, the room was so silent that Alex could hear the faint hum of Celia's mobility pod. Then, slowly, she extended one of her delicate, malformed hands toward him. "I accept," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremble in her fingers. The hall erupted into chaos. As Alex walked forward to take her hand, he couldn't help but notice the mix of emotions etched on the faces around him: anger, disbelief, pity, and, in a few rare instances, respect. But none of it mattered. For the first time in her life, Celia wasn't alone, and Alex had no intention of letting her down. The uproar in the assembly chamber lasted long after Alex and Princess Celia had exited. He could hear the echoes of outraged voices as they made their way down the grand corridors of the Iridani Palace. Celia's pod hovered silently beside him, her frail form cocooned in a shell of shimmering, crystalline material. She hadn't spoken a word since accepting his proposal, and Alex wondered if she was regretting her decision. "You didn't have to do that," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex stopped walking and turned to face her. "Yes, I did." Her face, though delicate and framed by flowing silver hair, was unreadable. Her blind eyes, a milky white without pupils, stared straight ahead. "Why?" He hesitated. It wasn't an easy question to answer. "Because someone had to," he said at last. "The way they treated you back there, it was wrong. They don't see you for who you are. They only see what they expect you to be. And he paused, running a hand through his hair. "I guess I just couldn't stand by and do nothing." Her lips twitched, almost forming a smile. "You're either very brave or very foolish human. Maybe a little of both," he admitted with a grin. Celia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head as if listening to something only she could hear. The silence between them stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Do you know what bonding entails?" she asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Not entirely," Alex confessed. "I understand it's a kind of partnership, but the specifics, you'll have to explain those to me." Her pod emitted a soft hum as she adjusted her position. "It's more than just a partnership. Among my people, bonding is sacred. It's a merging of minds and spirits, a connection deeper than words or actions. It requires trust, vulnerability, and—" she hesitated, her voice faltering. "It's not something to be taken lightly." Alex nodded, his expression serious. "I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Her blind eyes seemed to focus on him for the first time, as if she was somehow able to see beyond the physical. "You say that now, but you don't know what you've committed to. Once the bond is formed, there's no turning back." "Then I guess I'd better not mess it up," he said with a small smile, hoping to lighten the mood. To his surprise, she let out a soft laugh, a sound that was both musical and bittersweet. "You're a strange one, Alex Carter." "Strange is better than boring," he quipped. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Alex turned to see a group of Iridani guards flanking an older man dressed in elaborate robes. His expression was cold, his piercing golden eyes locking onto Alex with thinly veiled disdain. "Princess Celia," the man said, bowing stiffly. "I am Lord Virek, advisor to the royal court. May I have a word with you?" Celia's posture stiffened, her hands gripping the edges of her pod. "What is it, Virek?" The advisor's gaze flicked to Alex before returning to the princess. "Your decision to bond with this human has caused significant unrest among the council. Many believe it to be an insult to our traditions." "And what do you believe?" she asked, her tone icy. Virek hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It is not my place to question your choices, Your Highness. However, I must caution you, the bond is not merely symbolic. It will test both of you in ways you cannot imagine. If he is not worthy," his eyes narrowed at Alex, "the consequences could be disastrous." Alex stepped forward, his expression calm but firm. "With all due respect, Lord Virek, I'm not here to win anyone's approval. I'm here for her. Whatever tests come our way, we'll face them together." The advisor's lips pressed into a thin line. "We shall see," he said coolly. "The bonding ceremony will take place tomorrow at dawn. Prepare yourselves." Without waiting for a response, he turned and strode away, the guards following close behind. As the sound of their footsteps faded, Alex turned back to Celia. "Well, he seems nice." She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Virek, has always been pragmatic. He's loyal to the Empire, but his loyalty doesn't extend to me. Then we'll just have to prove him wrong, Alex said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Celia studied him for a long moment before nodding. Come, she said, guiding her pod forward. If we're going to do this, you'll need to understand what you're getting into. There's much to learn before the ceremony. As they walked side by side, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test them both in ways neither of them could predict. The Iridani temple stood at the heart of the royal palace, a structure of shimmering crystalline spires that caught the light of the twin suns. It was breathtaking, otherworldly, and, to Alex, intimidating. The air inside was cool and heavy, filled with the faint hum of ancient energy. Alex walked in silence beside Princess Celia, whose mobility pod glided effortlessly across the polished floor. She had explained bits and pieces of what to expect during the bonding ceremony, but the details remained murky. Every step forward felt like stepping into the unknown, and he wasn't sure if it was the temple's energy or his own nerves that made his chest feel tight. "Do you feel it?" Celia asked suddenly, her voice soft but sharp enough to break his thoughts. "Feel what?" "The temple's resonance. It's alive, in a way. It reacts to the emotions of those inside." He focused for a moment, closing his eyes. There was something, an almost imperceptible vibration in the air, like a faint pulse. "Yeah," he said finally. "I feel it. It's unsettling." She gave a small, knowing smile. "It should be. The temple is older than the Empire itself. It's said to be the work of the Celestials, the beings who first guided our ancestors. They created it to ensure that bonds were formed in truth, without deception or fear." "That's comforting," Alex said, his tone half joking but tinged with unease. "It should be," she said seriously. "But it's also a test. The temple will know if you're lying. If your intentions aren't pure, the bond will fail, and the consequences," she trailed off, her blind eyes fixed ahead. "Let me guess, disastrous?" She nodded. "For both of us." They reached the central chamber, a vast, circular room bathed in golden light. At its center stood a raised platform, carved from the same crystalline material as the temple. Symbols and runes etched into the surface glowed faintly, pulsating in a rhythm that seemed to sync with Alex's heartbeat. Standing at the edge of the platform was Lord Vyrek, flanked by two robed figures who Alex assumed were temple priests. The advisor's expression was as cold and disapproving as ever. "You are late," Vyrek said sharply, his gaze flicking to Alex. "We're right on time," Celia replied, her tone steady but firm. "Let's not delay any further." The priests stepped forward, their movements fluid and graceful. One of them, a tall figure with iridescent skin, gestured for Alex and Celia to approach the platform. "The bond is sacred," the priest intoned, their voice resonating as if amplified by the temple itself. "It is a union of mind, spirit, and purpose. Through this ritual, your souls will be entwined, and your fates will be forever linked. Do you both consent to this?" "I do," Celia said without hesitation. Alex hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "I do." The priests nodded and extended their hands, palms glowing faintly. "Step onto the platform." Alex took a deep breath and followed Celia onto the crystalline surface. As soon as his feet touched the glowing runes, a wave of energy rippled through him. It wasn't painful, but it was disorienting, like standing at the edge of a powerful current. "Place your hands on the center sigil," the priest instructed. Alex glanced at Celia, who gave a slight nod before extending her frail hands toward the glowing symbol at the center of the platform. He mirrored her movements, his palms brushing against the cool, pulsing surface. The moment their hands connected with the sigil, the room erupted in light. Golden energy surged around them, forming intricate patterns that swirled and danced like living things. Alex felt a sharp tug in his chest, followed by a rush of emotions that weren't his own: fear, loneliness, defiance, hope. "Celia," he whispered, realizing what was happening. "It's my mind." she said softly. And yours. The bond was forming. Their thoughts, memories, and feelings were intertwining, merging into a shared stream of consciousness. Alex caught glimpses of Celia's past, her childhood in isolation, the scorn of her people, the crushing weight of her responsibilities. He saw her strength, her resilience, and the quiet determination that had kept her alive despite everything. At the same time, she was seeing him. His struggles growing up on Earth, his feelings of inadequacy in the face of alien diplomacy, and the deep empathy that had driven him to step forward when no one else would. The connection deepened, and with it came a wave of pain. Alex gasped as his mind was flooded with a sharp, searing ache. Celia's pain, the physical and emotional scars she carried every day. He wanted to pull back, to escape, but the bond held him in place. Do not resist, the priest's voice echoed. Embrace the truth of one another. Celia's voice cut through the chaos, steady and reassuring. It's all right, Alex. Let it happen. He took a shaky breath and leaned into the connection, letting the pain and fear wash over him. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the agony faded, replaced by a sense of warmth and clarity. When the light subsided, Alex found himself standing on the platform, his hands still pressed against the sigil. Celia's pod hovered beside him, her expression calm but intense. It is done, the priest said solemnly. Alex turned to Celia, his voice quiet but steady. Are you okay? She nodded, a faint smile gracing her lips. I am. And you? Never better, he said, and for the first time, he truly meant it. But as they stepped down from the platform, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The bond had been formed, but what came next would test them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The bond was meant to unite their minds and souls beyond the physical. Yet, as Alex and Celia left the temple, the weight of it settled heavily. They walked silently through the palace corridors, Celia's pod humming softly. Alex felt her presence in the back of his mind, a steady, strange pulse. How do you feel? Celia asked. Like I've been hit by a starship. Alex replied wryly. You? Different. Lighter, she said thoughtfully. It's not just a connection. It's a sharing of burdens. For the first time, I don't feel alone. You're not, Alex said simply. As they approached the palace's central hall, a crowd of Iridani nobles awaited, their faces a mix of disdain and curiosity. At the center stood Lord Vyrek, his golden eyes cold. The bond has been formed, Vyrek announced. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but none dared object. The bond was sacred. Vyrek's gaze fixed on Alex. Human, you've bound yourself to the princess and the empire, but the bond will be tested. If you falter, Alex met his gaze. I won't. Bold words, Vyrek sneered. Celia's voice cut through the tension. Enough, Vyrek. Alex is my partner and will be treated with respect. Understood. Vyrek bowed stiffly. As you command, your highness. As the crowd dispersed, Alex muttered, Friendly bunch. They're afraid, Celia said. The empire is on the brink. The bond was meant to secure alliances, but with me as heir. They don't think you're strong enough, Alex finished. Her silence confirmed it. Then we'll prove them wrong, he said firmly. Before she could respond, an alarm blared. Alex's hand went to his sidearm. What's happening? Celia's expression darkened. We're under attack. A guard rushed in. Your Highness, the Kresh fleet is in orbit. They've begun bombarding the outer colonies. The Kresh? Alex asked. I thought they were allies. They were, Celia said bitterly, until they saw weakness. The guard urged them to safety, but Celia turned to Alex. You wanted to stand by me. Now's your chance to prove it. Adrenaline surged. Lead the way. As explosions rattled the palace, Alex followed Celia to a bunker. They're testing us, she said. If we show weakness, they'll take everything, and if we don't. Her expression was resolute. Then we fight. Inside the bunker, Celia commanded the room. Send a message to the creche. The Iridani Empire does not yield. The bond was still fragile, but Alex felt its strength. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The bunker buzzed with tension as officers scrambled to relay messages. Holographic maps flickered with grim projections of the creche fleet's movements. Alex stood close to Celia, his pulse racing. The creche fleet was massive. Hundreds of warships raining destruction on outer colonies and Iridani strongholds. Reports confirmed 2 orbital stations lost, and the fleet was advancing toward the capital. "We must evacuate the princess," Vyrek said sharply. "Her safety is paramount." "No," Celia said firmly. "I won't run. Your Highness." "I said no." Her voice carried unshakable strength. "If I flee, it will prove the creche right. The Empire needs a leader who stands and fights." Alex admired her resolve, but couldn't ignore the risk. "Celia, your life is important. And so is theirs," she said, gesturing toward the officers. "If I abandon them, I don't deserve to lead." Vyrek turned to Alex with a cold glare. "It's on you to ensure her safety." "I won't fail," Alex replied. Celia turned to the tactical display. "How many ships do we have left?" "Not enough," an officer said grimly. "The creche outnumber us 3-1, and their plasma rays outmatch our defenses." Celia's expression hardened. "The bond," she said. "We need to use it." Alex frowned. "What do you mean?" "The bond amplifies us. Together, we can interface with the temple's core systems and channel its energy to disable the creche fleet." "That's insane," Vyrek snapped. "The temple hasn't been activated in centuries. You could destroy yourselves." "Then we'll destroy ourselves," Celia said. "But we'll take the creche with us." Alex hesitated, then nodded. "I'm with you." As explosions shook the palace, they made their way to the temple. Inside, the air felt alive with energy. The central platform glowed faintly, runes pulsing with ancient power. "What now?" Alex asked. "Place your hands on the sigil. Focus on the bond." "Trust me," Celia said. He hesitated briefly before following her lead. As their hands touched the sigil, golden light flared, and a deep hum filled the air. The connection hit Alex like a tidal wave. Celia's thoughts, her fears, her determination all flooded his mind. He felt the temple's immense, sentient power. "Visualize the fleet," Celia said. Alex closed his eyes, and the image of the creche warships came to him. Their plasma cannons glowed ominously, poised for destruction. "Now!" Celia commanded. "Channel the energy." Together they pushed. The temple surged with energy, sending a blinding wave of light into space. The creche ships faltered, their systems shorting out as the pulse overwhelmed them. Explosions rippled through the fleet, leaving only disabled vessels in its wake. When the light faded, Alex collapsed, gasping for breath. Celia's pod hovered beside him, her expression pale but triumphant. "It worked," she said softly. Alex managed a weak smile. "Told you we'd get through this." The temple fell silent, its energy spent, but the bond between them remained stronger than ever. Together, they had achieved the impossible, and nothing would be the same again. The aftermath of the battle left the palace eerily quiet. The skies, once lit by creche warships, now shimmered with remnants of the energy pulse that had saved them. Debris from the fleet drifted in orbit, and the surviving ships had retreated. Inside the war room, Alex and Celia stood before a room of Iridani officials who now shifted uneasily, the skepticism they once held replaced by a mix of awe and fear. "Silence," Celia commanded, her voice cutting through the murmurs. The room stilled. "We've driven back the creche," she began, her voice calm yet firm. "Not through brute strength, but because we stood united. This victory proves what I've always known. The strength of this empire lies in resilience and adaptability, not outdated traditions. A high-ranking noble stepped forward. 'Your Highness,' This was a victory, but relying on an outsider and unstable ancient power raises questions about the future of the Empire. Questions, Alex said sharply, or fears? Because it seems the only reason you're questioning her is that she succeeded where you thought she'd fail. The noble's gaze narrowed. You don't understand our ways. You're right, Alex replied. But I understand loyalty and results. Celia just saved your empire. Maybe it's time to start listening to her. Enough, Celia interjected. Debates can wait. Right now, our focus must be on securing our people and preparing for what comes next. What comes next? Virek asked, his tone skeptical. The creche will return, Celia said. And when they do, they won't make the same mistake twice. An officer spoke hesitantly. The energy pulse you and the human generated was extraordinary, but we don't know if the temple can sustain it again or at what cost. We'll figure it out, Celia said. I want a full analysis of the temple and scouts monitoring the creche fleet. If they regroup, we need to know. As the room emptied, Virek lingered. This victory has painted a target on your back. The creche aren't the only ones who will see your bond as a threat. Be vigilant. I'm aware, Celia said, her tone hard, but I won't apologize for protecting my people. If anyone wants to challenge me, they can try. Virek bowed slightly, his warning unmistakable. Alone at last, Alex sighed. Well, that was a lot. Celia gave a tired laugh. Welcome to my life. You think Virek's right? Alex asked. He's always right, she admitted. But I've faced threats my whole life. The difference now is that I'm not alone. Alex met her gaze, the bond humming faintly in his mind. You're not, and you never will be. They stood in silence, exhaustion settling in. But beneath it, a quiet determination remained. They had survived the first test. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In the days after the victory, the Iridani Empire scrambled to rebuild. Messages went out to allies, fleets were repaired, and defenses were reinforced. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered, threatening to erupt. Alex felt it everywhere, in the pointed whispers and glances as he walked the palace corridors. Many still saw him as an outsider, especially after his role in the battle. But he had more pressing concerns. He found Celia in the war room, alone and focused on a glowing tactical display. You're going to work yourself into the ground, he said. Celia didn't look up but smiled faintly. The creche won't wait for us to recover, and if you collapse, don't worry, she said with steel in her voice. I've dealt with worse. Alex frowned. This isn't just about the creche, is it? She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. No. Before he could press further, the door slid open. Virek entered, flanked by two nobles. Your Highness, Virek said stiffly, the Council has concerns about the Empire's stability. Specifically, your position as heir. Alex's chest tightened. What are you saying? The taller noble ignored him. Your reliance on this human and ancient power raises questions about your strength. Strength? Celia interrupted coldly. Yes, the noble admitted. Our people value perfection and self-reliance. The bond you formed is unprecedented. It makes them question your fitness to lead. She just saved all of you, Alex snapped. How is that not proof of her strength? The second noble sneered. The creche attacked because they saw weakness in our leadership. Her Highness's condition. That's enough, Celia said sharply, silencing the room. I've heard these arguments my entire life, she said, her tone icy. Let me be clear. I will not let the prejudices of a few dictate this empire's future. If the council questions my ability to lead, let them bring their grievances to me directly. Virek's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of approval crossed his face. The council convenes tomorrow. Be ready. After they left, Alex exhaled. They're trying to push you out. I know, Celia said quietly. What are we going to do? She smiled faintly. We're going to win. The council chamber was packed the next day. Nobles voiced criticisms, some diplomatic, others blunt, questioning Celia's decisions, her reliance on Alex, and the use of the temple's power. Through it all, Celia remained calm. When it was her turn to speak, silence fell. "You all speak of tradition," she began, her voice steady, "of strength, perfection, and self-reliance. But where were those ideals when the Kresh attacked? Where was your strength when our fleets were destroyed? Where was your perfection when this empire was brought to its knees?" The chamber shifted uncomfortably. "I'll tell you where it was," she said. "It was with me and Alex, standing together, using everything at our disposal to protect our people. It was in the bond we formed, a bond that allowed us to do what none of you could." Her blind eyes swept the room. "This empire doesn't need leaders clinging to outdated ideals. It needs leaders willing to adapt and fight for the future. If that makes me unfit, so be it. But I won't stand aside while this empire crumbles." Murmurs rippled through the chamber until Virex stood, silencing the room. "The princess is right," he said, his voice firm. "She has proven her strength. Whether you like it or not, she is the future of this empire. I suggest you accept it." For a moment, no one spoke. Slowly, nobles nodded, some grudgingly. As the chamber emptied, Alex turned to Celia. "Well," he said with a faint smile, "that was intense." She sighed but smiled back. One battle down, many more to go. They had won this round, but the fight for the Empire's future had only just begun. The council chamber doors closed behind Alex and Celia, their footsteps echoing down the crystalline corridor. "You handled them perfectly," Alex said. Celia gave a faint smile. "For now, winning their loyalty long-term will be much harder." Alex nodded. The council's acceptance was fragile, their resentment palpable. A young officer approached, saluting. "Your Highness, scouts have returned with critical intelligence on the Kresh fleet." Celia's expression sharpened. "What did they find?" "The Kresh are regrouping at their stronghold on Avron Prime and preparing a new weapon designed to neutralize the temple's energy." Celia's hands gripped her pod. "They're already adapting. What do we know about this weapon?" Alex asked. "Not much," the officer admitted. "It's in a fortified facility. Breaking it would be nearly impossible." Alex glanced at Celia. "Impossible isn't really our style." She smirked. "No, it's not." "Prepare a strike team," Celia ordered. "We'll take the fight to them." 2 days later, Alex and Celia were aboard a sleek Iridani dropship headed for Avron Prime. The strike team, Iridani commandos in gleaming silver armor, sat silent and tense. "We're approaching the target," the pilot announced. The dropship sliced through Avron Prime's turbulent atmosphere. The planet's surface was a wasteland of jagged cliffs and red skies, with the Kresh fortress looming ahead, a mountain-carved structure bristling with defenses. Landing in a concealed ravine, the team moved swiftly, their movements precise. Celia's pod hovered just above the rocky terrain as they advanced. "What's the plan?" Alex asked. Celia gestured to the fortress. "Infiltrate, disable the weapon, and extract before they know what's happening. And if they notice..." Her look was sharp. "We improvise." The team disabled the perimeter surveillance systems and slipped inside. The fortress's dark metal corridors, lit by flickering lights, hummed with machinery. Resistance was light, too light. Reaching the lab, the doors slid open to reveal a massive chamber filled with machinery and consoles. At its center stood the weapon, a glowing blue cylinder. "That's it," Celia said. "Plant the charges." As commandos set explosives, Celia studied the weapon. "They've already made progress," she murmured. "Then let's hurry," Alex urged. The alarm blared. "Here we go," Alex muttered as Kresh soldiers stormed in. Chaos erupted as energy weapons lit up the lab. Alex fought to protect Celia, the bond between them burning bright. "Charges set," a commando shouted. "Detonate." Celia commanded. The room shook as the charges exploded, reducing the weapon to scorched rubble. "Fall back," Celia ordered. Fighting their way out, the team reached the dropship as Kresh reinforcements closed in. As the ship ascended, Alex glanced back at the smoldering stronghold, his chest heaving. They had succeeded, but the Kresh would retaliate, stronger than ever. The Kresh retaliated quickly. Reports of a massive fleet mobilizing from Avron Prime reached the palace just as the Iridani began celebrating. "There are hundreds of them," an officer said. "Our defenses won't hold." Celia's voice was steady. "Prepare all ships. Evacuate the colonies. Activate the temple. The temple's energy is drained," another warned. "If we don't use it, there won't be an empire left to save," she replied. Hours later, the Iridani fleet fought desperately. Enemy ships blotted out the sky, explosions rocking the city. "Get to the temple," Celia commanded. At the glowing platform, Alex and Celia placed their hands on the sigil. The bond flared and the temple's energy surged. "Celia, it's not enough," Alex said, straining. "It has to be," she said. "Focus." Their bond deepened, merging their will. A blinding pulse swept across the planet, disabling Kresh ships and silencing war machines. The strain was immense. "Stay with me," Celia urged. "I'm trying," Alex whispered. With their last strength, they sealed the energy within the temple. The battlefield fell silent. "It's done," Celia said softly. In the days that followed, the Empire hailed them as heroes. Nobles who once doubted Celia now revered her, and Alex was celebrated across the galaxy. On a quiet evening, Alex asked, "What happens now?" "We rebuild," Celia said. "We adapt, and we prepare for what's next. You don't back down, do you?" "No," she said softly. "And neither do you." Together, they had saved an empire. Whatever came next, they would face it together